So I want to talk about a few of like your core strategies and tactics. Tactical empathy.
Yeah.
Tell us about tactical empathy.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to put a little bit more of a spin on empathy, take it away from how it's become used. I mean, in society today, empathy is sympathy, empathy is agreement, empathy is compassion. And which then, if that's required, then it really limits who you can apply it with. Empathy was never meant that way. It was meant as understanding. It's originally an interpretation of a German word that was about understanding art. Didn't even actually have anything to do with people. So tactical is on top of everything that we've learned about empathy, which is just genuinely understanding, not agreeing. We know how the brain works. I mean, we got neuroscience. Like in the last 5 to 7 years, we put people in fMRIs. We watch the electricity move around in their brain. We watch how they respond to very specific emotional stimulations or what makes those emotional stimulations dissipate. So if we have actual neuroscience rules, why don't we tactically apply them? And that's the idea of tactical empathy, understanding combined with neuroscience for effective communication.
So another thing you've said on the note of empathy is that empathy is necessary for influence.
Wow, yeah.
Why?
Well, it's a hack. I mean, it is the world's great hack for influence, for low maintenance influence, for durable influence, for lasting influence. Like the crazy thing about it, one of Daniel Goleman's books, one of the ones he wrote called Focus. There's a chapter in it called the Empathy Triad. He talks about 3 types of empathy. One of them he refers to as cognitive empathy, which is very, very close to tactical empathy. And he says the people that are best at cognitive empathy are sociopaths. And why would sociopaths accidentally adopt this approach? Because it works. And it's durable, and it's low maintenance. And sociopaths are not known for their work ethic. They want to influence as many people as possible with as little effort as possible. And they don't want to have to come back to you every half hour to keep you on track. Tactical empathy, it's low maintenance and it works.
So because you mentioned sociopaths, when people think about even learning a lot of these strategies in negotiation, I'm sure some people initially might think, well, that sounds manipulative.
Right.
How do you bridge the gap? Because obviously the applications are very different, right? It's the same thing you look at marketing and say, okay, well, people with cult followings are great marketers, right? Just as long as you don't start a cult.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's a tool. One person's influence is another person's manipulation. Like I get asked the question a fair amount of time, and isn't what you're doing, isn't that manipulative? And I'll take out my phone, and I'll say, have you got one of these? And they'll say, well, yeah. Well, there are some really bad people using these for really evil things. So doesn't that mean you should give up your phone? Well, no, I don't use it for evil things. Well, that's exactly the point. Tactical empathy is extraordinarily influential. What are you using it for? If you're using it for bad things, ultimately it's going to catch up to you. And your relationships are going to go away, and then word is going to get out that you can't be trusted. Use your powers for good and not evil. And you're going to find yourself surrounded with phenomenal people.
So we talked about tactical empathy. There's another phrase that you use, and I had to look this up when I first heard it, neural resonance.
Yeah.
And I was like, Chris, hold on a second. I had to type it in and figure out what this means. But as I started to see, it's incredibly fascinating. Talk to us about it.
Well, again, this gets back to sort of how the brain works. The electrical wiring in our brain. And the amygdala in the middle of our brain, almond-sized organ, which pretty much every thought that we have either starts there or goes through there. The amygdala is a nerve center, and, pun intended, I suppose, command post. 75% of the amygdala is dedicated to negative thoughts. So what do? Well, you understand that that's the way people are wired. People are wired to survive, not to succeed. We're wired to be 75% negative because we'll survive, but we won't thrive. We won't succeed. And so you take that into account. You begin to understand how do you lift it up to the next level. The neuroimaging, the neuroscience has shown us that the best and most effective way to deal with that negative part of our brain really is as simple as calling it out, not denying it. You don't get rid of the elephant in the room by denying that the elephant is there or trying to say, don't look at the elephant. You say, hey, you know, there's an elephant in the room. And that begins to diminish it, if not make it go away entirely. And that's what we're talking about when we're trying to get people to resonate with one another, understanding how we're wired and how the electricity actually runs through our brain.
I remember you shared this with me a few years ago. And when we were doing one of our first conferences, I always come up there, I've got a nice suit. I imagine there's several people in the room that don't know our story, don't know kind of, you know, where we've come from, that see a young guy up there with a nice suit, probably thinking, trust fund kid, must be nice. And one of the first things I said this literally in the first 5 minutes was, I bet you guys are thinking this is a pretty nice suit. And it was amazing the impact that made in disarming everybody. So in your view, just call it out. If you know that someone's thinking it, if you know it's on their mind, you know.
Call it out. Yeah, exactly right. And like you said, it's astonishing how effective it is, isn't it?
So what about then, you know, the differences between like...
Nice application, by the way. Nicely done.
Thank you. Well, I had some help. The day before, I had a guest in our office that literally introduced me to that. So I changed it on the fly. I was like, okay, this could work, you know?
Who was that guy?
Remember, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. If you want to become a better negotiator, click the link in the description below.
My question is something that you just said a little while ago, the issues with people who are in the half category and people who are in the elf. And just thinking about, you have worked with and dealt with some of the most difficult half people in the world. I'm thinking of, you know, part of my question yesterday was dealing with the political divide in this country. And I'm wondering, if you're, for example, you're in a family, or your neighbor is a half, but you want to find some way where you have to work together for something that is going to benefit the entire building, let's say, or the entire community. Is there any, given your experience, is it at all possible to, would you try and find a way to half the half, to move, you know, they're not going to be an elf, but you can't have them totally a half. What would you do? What do you do in those situations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so it's, all right, so what's your best chance of success? And, you know, I used to use that phrase all the time, best chance of success. I learned it from, you know, my boss, one of my main mentors, Gary Nessner. He ran a crisis negotiation unit when I first got there. And Gary used to always talk about best chance of success. And I repeated it over and over and over again. And then finally we had a kidnapping go bad and people get killed. And I was at the helm and I said to myself, all right, so I guess best chance of success by definition means you're not always going to be successful. So the first thing you got to relieve yourself of is the needing to always be successful. You know, in baseball, to bat 1,000 or percentage-wise to win 100% of the time. That is not possible. Now, what's my best chance of success? Hostage negotiators got a 93% success rate. 93% success rate. I don't know of any other profession with that high of a percentage success rate. I don't know any salespeople. Wolf of Wall Street, in his book, The Way of the Wolf, he talked about having a 3% success rate. Hostage negotiators, tactical empathy, 93% success rate, which by definition means 7% of those people you are never going to get to an agreement with, no matter how much time you put in. So tactical empathy is still the answer, whether they're a neighbor, whether they're on the condo board, whether they're a family member. Expect it to take longer. Let it sink in. What we prescribe, and a lot of people, when you've got opposing arguments going on, a great way to interact with someone that you disagree with is to say, before I disagree with you, here's what I think your position is. You've done two things. You haven't lured them into thinking in any way, shape, or form that you don't have a counter point of view. Before I disagree, so they know that you're not in agreement. Here's what I think your position is. They're gonna listen. You're going to get that sentence out. And then they're going to listen intently for where you're coming from. And that's going to start the transformation process. Now, is that process going to be sufficient? Even if it's 93% successful, which is a really high rate, 7% of the time it's not going to work. But it's your best chance of success. Tactical empathy is always your best chance of success. Do not look for the instantaneous transformation that you will get in less adversarial conversations. One of our longtime students, customers, and I talk about this in my TED Talk. He's in an argument with his sister, family member, family gathering. His younger sister is a primary caregiver for their ailing father. And the pressure on her is enormous. She's had too much to drink, and she starts in on him. And he said he'd seen this happen before, and he realized it was just his turn. And all he wanted to do was make her feel heard and not disagree with anything. Make her feel heard. He said it went on for an hour before she finally ran out of gas. And then she just stopped. She just ran out of gas. Did not get a that's right out of her. Did not feel the oxytocin moment at all. Just was relieved that she was no longer beating on him. The next day, she sends him an email that said, "Yesterday I attacked you, and you showed me nothing but love. Thank you for being my big brother." Give it a chance to sink in, give it a chance to work as much as it possibly can, and realize that you've done the best that you can. And it won't always work every time, but without trying it, it won't work at all. That's the best I can give you.
I hope you didn't hear all the moments when like, oh my God, wow. That is just truly beautiful. Truly beautiful. And you could I could just feel how that can, because when you focus on really caring for somebody, that is the most beautiful thing you could do. Thank you. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tactical empathy. What's how do you use that? What does it mean?
First of all, we put the word tactical in front of it to destigmatize the word, because in common usage the word is thought of as sympathy or compassion, and it's not. In usage, it's been convoluted and distorted. I can empathize. I've been there. I feel that way. I agree. That was not the original origin of the word or how it was meant to be applied. That was why I started collaborating with Harvard in the first place, because Bob Mnookin wrote in his book, empathy is not even liking the other side. It's not agreement. It's not liking. It's demonstrating that you understand. Now, and people equate understanding to agreement. In my terrorism days in New York, we're trying to get Muslims to testify against other Muslims in open court. And they were shocked by that, by a whole bunch of reasons. If you want to be proud to be an American, have an Arab Muslim who's in this country just trying to work really hard. They said to us after the trial, when you told us ahead of time this was about the truth, we thought you were kidding. And having gone through the process, we realized that your system is about the truth. And so how do we get those Muslims to come in and testify honestly? I would sit down with them and I'd say, right off the bat, you think for the last 200 years there's been a succession of American governments that have all been anti-Islamic. And they would go, yeah. Now, that's empathy. I never said it was true. I didn't say I agreed. I didn't say I disagree. I took no position whatsoever on that statement. I'd say, you think this. And I'd nail it on the head. And none of it is that hard when you really realize, you know where the other side's coming from. You're just scared to say it. Like I'd say it to these guys and you just watch them be shocked and then dialed in with me, having said what was in the back of their mind. That's all it is.
And that is a similar thing to labeling. You say here, labeling is a way of validating someone's emotion by acknowledging it. Give someone's emotion a name and you show that you identify with how that person feels. It gets you close to someone without asking about external factors you know nothing about. Think of labeling as a shortcut to intimacy, a time-saving emotional hack. So this is similar to, this is what you think about a certain subject, which now I'm reading back to you. Hey, you think that the past 200 years has been anti-Islamic governments. This would be, it seems like you're angry about the way the Islamic world's been treated.
Yeah, that'd be a great start.
A good start.
Like some of this stuff is ridiculous too, and especially talking about politicians. Like I'm surprised more politicians don't get this. Mario Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo's father, Chris Cuomo's father, governor of New York. I saw him address a hostile crowd of African Americans that were waiting for Winnie Mandela. This is just before Nelson Mandela gets out. Winnie Mandela is doing a world tour. They're keeping the pressure on the South African government, make sure they let him go. She's in New York. Heavy-duty African-American crowd, almost all African-American. Mario Cuomo isn't just not African-American, he's Italian, which in New York is a much different dynamic. At the time, a couple of black guys had been chased out of an Italian neighborhood into traffic and had gotten killed by getting hit by cars. Tensions with the Italians are very high. Cuomo steps up into a crowd that is just short of throwing rocks at him before he said a word. He starts out and he starts going, you see a world that doesn't take your skin color into account. You see a world that doesn't give you a chance because of where you came from and how they perceive you. And he just started laying out thing after thing after thing after thing that they were in fact feeling and thinking, not agreeing with any of it. I guarantee you before he stepped out on the stage, he probably said to one of his aides, watch me turn this crowd around. They start cheering him inside of about 5 minutes. Before he's finished with them, they loved him. Like they were so in favor because he dialed into them and what they were thinking and feeling, and he wasn't afraid to say it. And to this day, I'm shocked that more politicians don't do that. Because it's not agreement. He takes no position on it whatsoever. This is what you see.
Yeah. Yeah, it lets that person understand that you understand at a minimum, which is what we're looking for. You say here, as you try and insert tools of tactical empathy into your daily life, I encourage you to think of them as extensions of natural human interactions not artificial conversational tics. In any interaction, it pleases us to feel that the other side is listening and acknowledging our situation. Whether you are negotiating a business deal or simply chatting to a person at the supermarket, butcher counter, creating empathetic relationship and encouraging your counterpart to expand on their situation is a basis of healthy interaction. Now, this is something I say to people a lot. I say, hey, listen, you can't pretend to do this stuff. You're not Robert De Niro and you're not Meryl Streep. So don't pretend to be curious about them. Don't pretend. Just really feel that way.
Yeah.
You need to say, hey, I really want to learn what I really want to understand what you're thinking here. Because if you're trying to act, you're going to fail. Most people are going to fail when they're trying to act.
Right.
And I always say intent has a smell. So if you come in there and you're just trying to butter me up with some little conversation, I'm going to smell it. Most people are going to smell that. I know the reason I know that is because when I was a young SEAL, I was the youngest and most junior guy in my first 2 SEAL platoons. So when, the boss would come in, we whatever bullshit he was throwing, we'd see right through it. Like, okay, I see what's really going on here. Intent's going to have a smell. So it should be earnest. All this stuff should be earnest. You go on to say some key points here. Imagine yourself in your counterpart's situation. The beauty of empathy is that it doesn't demand that you agree with the other person's ideas. You may well find them crazy, but by acknowledging the other person's situations, you immediately convey that you're listening. And once they know you are listening, they may tell you something you can use. So boom. The reasons why a counterpart will not make an agreement with you are often more powerful than why they will make a deal. So focus first on clearing the barriers to agreement. Denying barriers or negative influences gives them credence. Get them into the open. What do you mean by that?
Which part?
You and I are talking, and what barriers are you looking at? What barriers? Sometimes you're saying barriers. The reason I'm not going to agree to a deal isn't because I can't find common ground. It's just that there's these barriers that I have that are worse.
Right. So first of all, there's kind of three different things there, and I'm gonna try to drive a stake through the heart of common ground to start with. And this is my theory on common ground. First of all, the strongest common ground is usually ethnicity or geography, and geography is more powerful than ethnicity. Like if you and I grew up in the same neighborhood, and I don't know what all combination of ethnic groups you are, because like if you were in New York, you'd be one of 5, and I wouldn't know which one it is.
He's talking to Echo Charles right now, by the way.
Yeah. So, but if we grew up in the same neighborhood, like you and I'd resonate. Now, if you and I had the exact same ethnicity and you grew up in New York City and I grew up in Mississippi, we're going to like, I don't know what this dude is talking about. There's going to be some resonance, but geography is stronger. Now, then common ground also. Why do I want to have common ground with you? So you understand me. So we share core values. You understand where I'm coming from. If I just demonstrate that I understand, I don't got to be from your neighborhood. Because what common ground is, does this guy or gal understand me? So that just shows somebody you understand, and common ground is unnecessary. Not a barriers. Example, one of my favorites, Bob Iger's book, The Right of a Lifetime. He's sitting down to negotiate what ends up being the sale of Pixar to Disney. At the time, Jobs hates Disney, seethes with hatred for Disney. And when I went to school, everybody writes up that purchases, it was obvious, it was a great move, it was great for both companies. Not how this thing goes down. Iger gets put in charge of Disney. He reaches out to Jobs because he knows there's been bad blood. Iger's been the number 2 guy at Disney for 9 years. Reaches out to Jobs and on some congratulatory thing, and Jobs immediately shoots back at him, how long were you Michael's number 2? Because he's blaming Michael Eisner. How long were you the number 2 guy? Well, this was all what was going down. Not willing to accept any compliment. So Iger says, let's talk about this. Jobs says, come on down. Yeah, you want to talk to me? Come into my backyard. Go to the Apple campus. They get ready to set out. Jobs wants to work off a whiteboard. Pros and cons. Offers the pen to Iger. Says, you go first. Now, Iger knows how much bad blood there is here. He is not anxious to say a word. And this is in his book. So he says, no, Steve, go ahead. Steve gets up. Jobs starts writing all the reasons why not to do it. All the barriers. He effectively does this approach on himself. And writes some nasty stuff about Disney. Like just short of out and out profanity, insulting, your culture sucks, you guys suck, everything about you is horrible, your children, everything. He's laying all this stuff out there. And he kind of gets done, and he looks to hand the pen back to Iger, who's not just crestfallen, because he just feels like he's gotten the stuffing kicked out of him. And he says, well, I guess there are a lot of negatives there. And Jobs looked back at him and says, sometimes the positive outweigh the negative. Because he deactivated all the barriers. They got all the barriers out. They got them out into the open air. They cleared their head by first discussing and just calling them out. Like Bob Iger does not offer a bit of explanation for any of this. No, Iger never says, but that wasn't true, or but, oh yeah, nothing. He doesn't say a word. He just lets all the negatives get out there. And when he lets Jobs run the full course of the reasons for not doing it, then Jobs is left with the positives, which is in fact the way humans make decisions. You will reconcile in your head, how do you live with the negatives, deal with them, deactivate them, before you decide to do something. If you can reconcile all those negatives, as soon as you do, your brain then goes to the positive. And then the positive picks up this tremendous amount of velocity, having been unshackled from the negatives. We do it all the time. We do it constantly.
I had this thought a couple times already during this discussion. And it just hit me again.
What is this all about? Applying tactical empathy with success. How are these 4 hostage negotiators going to explain what it is that they did in their world so that I understand how it fits in my world? What is it that we do or did? Our job was to engage another person in a highly emotive state, de-escalate those emotions, and return them to a normal functioning level in order to influence their surrender. And we got to be pretty good at it. Our success rate, at least here in the States, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 93%. That is to say, 93% of the time that we get called out, we're able to influence the person whom we're dealing with to surrender. And I would ask that you compare and contrast that to your ability, or your success rate, I should say, at influencing other people into doing what you need them to do. The best of you on this call are probably successful around 35 to 40% of the time. I was shocked to know that in some circles, a 1% conversion or success rate was considered acceptable. Those of you who are familiar with Jordan Belfort know that he is the Wolf of Wall Street. And he wrote in his book, The Way of the Wolf, that he would provide his salespeople with 200 leads. He expected them to qualify 10 and close 1. And that just kind of blew me away. But why the disparity? If hostage negotiators are around 93%, and you're around 40%, why is there a disparity in those numbers? Is it because Marcella, Roger, Sandy, Troy, and I are smarter than everybody else? And the answer to that question is no. The answer to the question lies in our appreciation of the human nature response, which dictates a couple of things. Number one, negative emotions and dynamics drive decision-making and drive behavior. There's no two ways about it. And the other is your voice causes an emotional impact on the part of the person receiving your message. It can be large or small, it can be positive or negative, but it is nonetheless there. And once you understand those two concepts, once you get your head around those things, once you learn how to navigate the concept looking through those two prisms, people become predictable. You can start to predict what they're going to say and how they're going to act. And by using these skills that have been tested and proven across the world, think about what that would mean to your business, to your life, if you were to increase your ability to influence other people by 50% or more. That's what we're pursuing over the next 2 months. Changing the way you think about communicating one person to another. Not a huge change, just a 1 degree shift in the way you think about communicating one person to another. Now, what's going to get in your way? These skills are counterintuitive. You're going to think to yourself, this is awkward. This is stupid. This may have worked with you because in hostage negotiations, it's a one and done transaction where you have to be concerned about future relationships. You're going to think that all of us have retired and we're partaking in illegal substances that we couldn't partake in while we were sworn. And we just sit around smoking dope and thinking this stuff up. We're snake oil salesmen. You're going to say to yourself, I cannot imagine those words coming out of my mouth. You're going to think about the last time that you were in a difficult conversation or negotiation and what the response would have been from your counterpart if you executed any of the skills that we are going to talk about. You're going to get those feelings. The silver lining. The silver lining of the awkwardness, I should say, is that within awkwardness lies accelerated learning. You learn better when you're awkward because you have to focus. And what we're going to be talking about over the next 8 weeks is tantamount to you learning a new language. Those of you who are fluent or at least proficient in a language other than your native tongue, think about what you felt like when you started to learn. After a week of learning that language, I would not expect you to perform very well if I took you and dropped you into a community where that was the predominant language. Fast forward 6 months, you'd feel a little bit better. It's the same way with the Black Swan method. It's tantamount to learning a new language. Now, some of you are still maybe struggling. Yeah, I get it, but I still don't see how it's going to relate to the business world. Well, at the end of the day, regardless of your space, you guys are compliance professionals. You provide a good or a service, and you try to get people to comply, i.e., to buy. Troy, Sandy, Roger, Marcella, and I are the ultimate compliance professionals on the planet because all of us sold jail time and all of us got people to buy it all of the time. And so in the most extreme circumstances, when the emotions are highest, when the stakes are the highest, we found that the skills work regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender, race, creed, or color. It's not by accident that hostage negotiators in Japan, India, Africa, Middle East, North America, South America, Europe, they're all trained in the same skill set. So we know it works regardless of the circumstances. Why? Because everything that we do is based on that human nature response. So whether you're talking about mergers and acquisitions, you're talking about contract negotiations, you're talking about negotiating for a salary increase, you're talking about negotiating with your 17-year-old about getting off her tail and making a decision about what college she wants to go to. The skills work. The biggest hurdle, as I mentioned, is going to be the awkwardness. The awkwardness is going to make you uncomfortable. When you are uncomfortable, what you want to do faster than anything else is to get comfortable again. And that's going to result in you reverting back to bad habits, old habits. The way you minimize, reduce, and eventually eliminate that awkwardness is by going out and road testing this stuff. We're going to give you various assignments over the next 8 weeks where you're going to be expected to go out and road test it. Don't leave any of these sessions believing this stuff works simply because we said so. You have to go out and apply it yourself. See for yourself. Once you use it and you get the desired result, it's going to be like you seeing the unicorn for the first time. You're not going to be able to wait to see it again. Repetitions, repetitions, repetitions. 64 to 67 repetitions is what it takes for you to develop a new habit. And it starts right now. The awkwardness comes from your brain telling you there is no neural pathway yet developed for the skill that you're asking me to use. How do you develop that neural pathway? The only way to do it is practice, practice, practice. We are going to intentionally make you uncomfortable. We're going to intentionally put you in a box. We're intentionally going to restrict your movement as it pertains to the execution of the skills. And we're doing it for a specific reason. We want you to get the fundamentals down first. Once you get the basics down first, then as we move through the content, we'll allow you a little bit more leeway, a little bit more latitude to start experimenting. But initially, we're going to keep you in that box and make you work the skills just as we say it.
Negotiation is a series of emotional moments. Whether you try to remove emotion from the situation or not, doesn't matter. You're dealing with a counterpart or set of counterparts that are making decisions emotionally. And so there's going to be a series of emotional moments that occur. Our job as negotiators, in addition to making them the problem solver, showing the understanding, right? We get all those things. In addition to that is we got to be able to ask ourselves, are we intimately in control of the emotions that take place at the table? When they're happy, is it because we said something that made them happy, or do they just happen to become happy? When they're pensive, when they're deep in thought, is it because we prompted it and now they got this emotional reaction of I got to think about it? If they're worried about fear of loss, of losing an opportunity, is it because we prompted it or did it just happen? And the reality is we want to be in control of those moments. When they feel something, we want it to be because we made them feel that way. And right. And then we calibrate those emotions in our favor. And so this is all about influence. And I know a lot of people struggle with what's the difference between influence and manipulation. The reality is they're essentially synonyms. The difference between the two is intent. If your intention is to manipulate and take advantage, you might sneak into one of these classes, but there's a really good chance we're not going to work with you one-on-one and help you really reach the next level because we don't deal with narcissists. But if you want to build trust and develop an understanding that leads to that influence, you're in a different realm. And so intent is really the difference between the two. And tactical empathy is how we execute this stuff. And so the other thing to always keep in mind as well is there isn't a rigid sequence. I wish that I could lay out a step-by-step, here's this skill and then use this skill and then use this skill and then use that skill. And it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And if you've had enough exposure to the Black Swan Group, what you probably found is questions that get asked, especially if they get answered by like myself, Sandy, Derek, or Chris, right, whoever's on the screen, you're probably going to get 3 different answers to the same question. And the reality is all 3 answers are right. Some of it is, what are you comfortable with? Where's your knowledge level? And then what works really well and naturally for you, right? 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you to use a label. 9 times out of 10, Chris Voss is going to tell you to use a calibrated question. How you phrase it, how you drop it in, and what your tone sounds like is really where the rub is at. And so situational awareness is a big part of what fits best in the moment. Another question that came from, has been coming in, is actually comes from a female, a woman who has taken a new position. And she has mentioned that when she uses, well, first of all, start like this. She's been accused of saying, I'm sorry too much. And more specifically, she's been accused of saying, I'm sorry when she uses no-oriented questions, right? She says labels, mirrors, right? Some of the other stuff seems to work well. But every time I use a no-oriented question, someone says, don't apologize. You apologize too much. And so being that this is a woman that's taken a new position and you are essentially head of our department as far as getting women acclimated and giving them a new perspective to look at things from, what would you say to her? What advice would you give her in the same circumstance that she's in?
It kind of depends. That's our sort of patented answer. But as a female, sometimes things that you say might be confused with apologies. You said no-oriented questions. People are telling you you're apologizing too much. Be mindful of how you phrase things and be mindful of your tone. If you are too soft, you're going to come off as too emotional. If you're too assertive, you're going to come off as too harsh and you're going to get that label. It's really a fine line that a woman has to walk to be kind of considered in the right place by a lot of different people.
And I'm going to jump in just to add some clarity to the question, because this was something that I missed when I threw it out there.
Okay.
The other thing she mentioned is she's getting this feedback from other female coworkers. So when she's in a workplace and she uses no-oriented questions, she's got other female coworkers that come to her, and the feedback she gets is, don't apologize. You apologize too much. Quit apologizing. And so how does she balance that, especially where the feedback is coming from?
I got 2 cents to throw in after Sandy gets done too.
Sure.
Okay. Women are the harshest critics of other women. And if I've learned nothing from this power hour, I found out that while women are always worried about dealing with assertive men at the workplace, it's other assertive women that are probably more dangerous. A lot of women have the mindset that they have to go in and be tough, and they have to, take no prisoners and go in there and stomp all over the place, or they're going to be seen as too weak. So when they have a woman who doesn't feel the need to do that because they can express things with their words and they can use the Black Swan techniques and they can use tactical empathy, they get looked down upon because these other women haven't found the secret yet. When you use tactical empathy, it puts you in a place where you're not going to come off too emotional. You're not going to come off too assertive. You're going to come off as just this kind of regulated person. And it's really hard to explain how that feels until, like Derek says, go out and road test it, because you'll see that your biggest critics that you're around are going to be other women, because the mindset that a woman has going into the workplace is that they have to be this tough brick wall and that they can't really be a real human being. And you find by using these skills that you have a lot more power than you think you have, just by using the tactical empathy. Don't let those other women get to you. Label the dynamic that you see. It seems like you have a problem with the way I act. Let them tell you something else. There's something else going on there. It really has nothing to do with you for the most part. It's probably to do more on their end. And they don't really understand how you're being so successful and you're not being assertive or harsh like they are. So talk to them, label that dynamic, pull them in with you, and give them a little Black Swan technique, teaching there, and let them know what you're doing and let them see how it's working for you. But just be aware that most women are harsh toward other women, especially women that have found the secret of tactical empathy, because these other women haven't found it yet. They can't find their niche. They don't know where they fit in. So they take it out on you instead of trying to figure out what's going on. And you can figure out where they're getting pressure from and what's happening on their side by labeling that dynamic to get more information from them.
Yeah, and Professor, you can definitely jump in here in a minute, and I would just add one thing. I don't think that this is just a woman to woman dynamic in the workplace, right? That tends to be the subject matter of our question here. But I think this applies. What you said, Sandy, applies anytime you're someone that's getting heat in the workplace, whether from the lateral piece or from above, applying exactly what Sandy is just talking about, right? People are going to be so thrown off by your ability to execute empathy well that it might sound like an apology to them when you're actually doing a really good job asking a no-oriented question. And so the interaction that takes place between you and that individual has to be handled, and it's got to be handled very similar to exactly what Sandy just laid out. So, Professor, I'll throw it to you here, sir. I know you got some thoughts you want to throw in.
Yeah, really, to succeed, you got to be willing to be different, and the middle of the bell curve, if you will, where 80% of the people are. You're gonna scare them. I mean, they're gonna tell you you're doing it wrong. They're gonna if they're in the middle of the bell curve, and 80% of them are, when you're doing something different, their gut check is, oh my God, you can't succeed doing something different than me, because that means I'm doing something wrong and I can't deal with that. To be a top performer is to be different. And initially it's scary and it's frightening, and then it starts to be fun. And the particular fun for women, I continue to love to discover the fun for women. Like, I have gotten asked, and I'm sure the others have too, no shortage of time, can I use this stuff for picking up women? So guys asking me, can they use the mirrors and labels and empathy for women? And finally, I get feedback just a couple of days ago from a woman who's using labels and mirrors on the guys that are hitting on her, so she can sort them out and decide who she likes and who she doesn't like. And she's just killing it. And so she has started using the mirrors and the labels with guys she doesn't particularly want to go out with, just to see what happens. Your small stakes practice. And I'm hearing that these guys are confessing their love to her, and she thought they were players, and now all of a sudden they're just killing themselves for attention. And she's just gotten massively empowered by this stuff. So, fellas, watch out, because women are picking this up.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things you have to do is, be curious, man. If you're curious and you're always looking for the why, it's going to cause you to be more engaging with the individual that you're dealing with. They're going to think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So be curious. If you're curious, people are going to say, wow, this person is one of the best listeners I've ever dealt with. They're going to start to like you. And the more they like you, the easier it's going to become. And that'll be part of your everyday life once you start doing it. And you start realizing that it's who you are now. It won't be a chore. It won't be a challenge. It'll just be part of who you are.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Troy. And something I'll just to piggyback on the end of that. Every conversation you have, every single conversation you have, there isn't one interaction you're going to have that is outside of the realm of possibility for practice to get reps in. So outside of work, anytime you interact with another person. And then something else I add to it, a mental piece around curiosity. You got to flip your brain into a place where you are ready to verbalize understanding. Right? If mentally it's too taxing to get to a place where, like, all right, I'm just going to verbalize understanding here. That's all I'm going to do. Right? Which is really hard to do when we're already triggered or we're tired. It's the end of the day. We already got a lot of things on our mind. We just want to have the conversation, not put a lot of effort into it, and move on to the next thing, right? That happens to all of us. It's human nature. We all get bogged down. We all get fatigued. And in those moments, that's when it's that much more important to focus on actually being curious. And the reality is, this is going to be a harsh statement. If you're in a place where you don't want to mentally click into gear to perform at that level, you're going to continue to have conversations that don't get you anywhere. Right? We talked about this last week. We're still in the same spot. Did you verbalize an in-depth understanding in the last conversation? The answer to that is no. Then that's where the rubber meets the road, as it were. And so, yeah, it is, especially when you're just starting out and it isn't muscle memory, right? You're in a shoe, right? You're learning the basics. You're just getting off the ground. You're going to have to mentally switch your focus to a verbal understanding and genuine curiosity. And that feels like a very big step sometimes, right? For all the reasons I mentioned earlier. But that's perfect, Troy. And if you haven't heard this, I always suggest call up your most expensive utility and get a discount. It's a great way to practice where you got low stakes, but getting a win is going to be a big deal for you. That's an easy one to start practicing with. So continuing with our questions, kind of going around here. Derek, I'd love to throw this to you. Someone asked specifically.
Brian, please hold on to that challenge for Derek for a second, because you just gave me a bit of inspiration.
Sure. Yeah. Professor, if you got a thought, please feel free.
All right. So, unofficially, today is International Tactical Empathy Day. And there's no shortage of stuff raging on social media as we speak. Whether it be American politics, whether it be international politics. The Israeli-Palestinian thing is raging right now. It's raging so much, it's actually catching the attention of the American media, and the American media only really wants to pay attention to when we're tearing each other apart, because they love the rock throwing and they love the flame throwing that's going on. Well, whichever one of these issues you feel most passionate about, here's what I challenge you to do. Just today, just for today. You only got to do it today. You don't got to live this way. But International Tactical Empathy Day, find somebody's position on social media that you disagree with and wade into the conversation like this. Before I disagree with you, let me make sure I've got your perspective correct. And then with the curiosity that Brandon and Brandon and Troy are talking about now, try and lay out their perspective until either you can't take it no more and you just quit, or until they tell you you've got it right. Until they say that's right. You've got my perspective correctly. And keep it up until the one you're arguing with confirms whether that's right, or an agreement that you got it right. Now, this is likely going to be really hard and maybe even exhausting for you the first couple times you try it. So you can go back to your arguments tomorrow. But today, just for today, let's see how much of this tactical empathy madness we can inject into the raging that's going on in social media. See what happens. You want some practice where you got nothing at stake? Try it today. Just try it today. An American overseas doing something stupid. This is a sociopath that has him. The question I often get, or the one that I like to throw out, is, does empathy work on sociopaths? Well, this guy is a sociopath. He's got on his uniform. Sunglasses, black bandana, black t-shirt, camo pants, 45 strapped to his side, 45 caliber automatic handgun strapped to his side of his camouflage pants. He thinks this makes him look daring and dashing. He doesn't have on sunglasses because it's sunny in the south of the Philippines. It is, but he's got them on because he thinks it makes him look more photogenic. And this is the negotiator that I'm coaching. Now, we go through the negotiation for a period of months. The terrorist is not asking for ransom for the release of the American. He's asking for war damages for 500 years of oppression in the south of the Philippines, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans. Now, right now, you're saying, like, well, this is one reason why hostage negotiation doesn't apply to me. Because I was never in a negotiation where the other side were bringing up things from the past that had nothing to do with me, that occurred to them before I ever showed up. In my business negotiations, people don't react like that. They don't bring baggage to the table. Oh, wait a minute. That happens in every negotiation. People bring their history of experience to the table, even history I had nothing to do with. So we finally decide, after 4 months of a stalemate, that we're going to get a that's right out of the terrorist. So I coach my negotiator. Today you get a that's right.
And he gets the terrorist on the phone. He says, you're not asking for ransom for the American. You're asking for war damages for 500 years of oppression. And he goes on at length over the injustices that occurred and the things that the other side had experienced that had nothing to do with the Americans or the American being held, but what they had experienced. And after going on at length over the other side's experience, he goes silent. He doesn't offer an argument in return. He just goes silent. And the kidnapper on the other end of the phone says, that's right. He summarizes the other side's facts, not our facts, but their facts, and how they felt about the facts. And the kidnapper says, that's right. And the ransom demand goes away. It just goes away. Money is never mentioned again in the kidnapping. It takes several more twists and turns. And on Maundy Thursday, on the Thursday before Easter, the hostage walks away. The military flew down and picked him up. They held a big press conference in Manila announcing the rescue. We flew Schilling back, the American, back to the United States, and I was back in the Philippines a couple of weeks later. I connected back up with the negotiator that I had coached, and he said, you're not going to believe who called me on the phone. I said, I don't know who called you on the phone. The sociopathic terrorist. What did he say? He said, have you been promoted yet? I don't know what it was he said to me on the phone. I was going to kill the American. You're really good at what you should do, what you do. They should promote you. This is what the demonstration of understanding gets, ladies and gentlemen, because in that moment, the person who lost everything called the person on the phone responsible for it to congratulate him and let him know that he was still willing to talk to him. Despite everything that happened, he was still willing to talk and collaborate should they talk again. Everybody that you interact with should always be willing to talk with you because your brand is empathy. Your brand is understanding. That's what That's Right does when you begin to apply this to all of your interactions. People will always be willing to talk with you. Your brand is empathy. Your best self is relayed to others through the use of empathy.
So you got employees that, again, are not listening to what you say. They're not executing. They're not batteries included, right? They don't take initiative. They essentially wait for the boss to do this thing before they take action at all. And so what do? And so some of this, I would say, is going to be solved by an accusations audit. What is causing them to not execute in the way that is most desirable? Some of that's going to be based on what's going on in your environment. And so it might have to do with fairness. It might have to do with they don't feel like they're being put on the right projects, or they feel like whatever's being assigned to them is beneath them, or the way that they're being assigned is they may see it as being disrespectful. It could be any number of things. But going in with an accusations audit of you probably feel this way is going to leave you in one of two places. It's going to say, you know what, boss, that's exactly right. This is the way I wish that it worked out. Or they're going to say, boss, that's not actually it at all. It's this other thing. What does that tell you? You're going to be better informed by leading with the accusations audit, because you're either going to be exactly on the money, or they're going to say, no, that's not actually how I see it. I see it like this, boss. This is what I need you to know as your employee. Any additional thoughts that you would add to that specific one there, Derek?
Setting your clear expectations, summarizing the conversation, and once you have got an understanding / agreement as to what the execution of whatever looks like, you're going to want to rule of three it. There are three types of yeses that you get from anybody, and that's counterfeit, confirmation, and commitment. And so once you've come to that understanding, that's your first yes. You're going to want to hit that yes at least twice more to make sure that you guys are on the same page. A yes without a how is worthless. So when they say, yes, boss, got it, I'm on my way, and they go out and execute and they don't come back, it's ultimately your fault because you didn't get the confirmation yes and you didn't get the commitment yes. How do you get those commitment And confirmation yeses, just simply label, mirror, or paraphrase what has just been said. They tell you, boss, I'm going to have this project to you by next Tuesday. Sounds like next Tuesday is a better day for you. Yes, that's your second yes. Your third yes is going to be, so if I understand you correctly, next Tuesday, by Monday night, you will have all of this thing wrapped up. And on Tuesday morning, when I come in, it'll be in my inbox waiting for my approval. Something to that effect. That's your third yes. And so once you've gotten them to, those are public promises, and it's very hard, not impossible, but it's hard for people to go back on a promise that has been verbalized, that has been vocally stated. So when they speak it into the air, it's like going into a tablet with a chisel.
Yes, tone is going to be important. Again, circumstance drives your strategy. Generally, your tone in a situation with the accusations audit is, you don't necessarily want to have a curiosity tone, because the things you lay in your accusations audit are things that you're sure of. You probably feel like you're getting passed up when you shouldn't be. It might even seem like, you've been ignored, or your real talents haven't been taken into account, right? You want to say it as almost a declarative tone. You want to say it as though you know it to be truth. This is how, as almost to say, this is how I know you see the world. When you wake up in the morning, the sky looks green, the sun is purple, and there's giraffes in your yard. Right? That might not be true from your point of view. That doesn't change what they see. So yeah, declarative tone, you want them to know that you see it also. These are also things that I see to be true.
When they have a valid argument, but it's not appropriate for the specific situation, find out what's the motivation. Seems like you have a reason for saying X, and find out what their thinking was. And then I would follow that with a no-oriented question. Would it be a bad idea if I explained why that's not appropriate in this instance? Again, you're deferring, you're asking permission to give an explanation, and then you lay it out. And then you lay out what would be appropriate for that situation. How do you lay that one out? With another no-oriented question. Are you against? And then fill in the blank. What is appropriate for that situation? So I would listen to their side, label, mirror, paraphrase, and then come up with a no-oriented question. Are you against whatever it is for the appropriate situation? Would it be a bad idea if I explained to you why this was not appropriate?
In regards to the survey results, a new manager recently promoted, unfortunately got promoted over someone in the organization that someone felt like they deserved the promotion because they've been around longer. But the reality is this individual got promoted because they're a go-getter, they're crushing it, they're killing it. And so the residual effects of that is they're dealing with a coworker who is now a subordinate that is now being very disruptive, doesn't want to have a decent conversation, sees them probably as the enemy in the office because they got passed up by this person. And so, Derek, what would you offer this person as far as being able to solve that with this individual who is now a subordinate, who seems to be very obstinate because they feel like they got passed up for the promotion that they deserved?
All right, so there's a lot there to work with, but a thumbnail sketch of what it should look like would be you're going to have to address it. You're going to have to address the counterproductive behavior because it impacts your credibility as a leader. So you're going to have that one-on-one. How are you going to start that one-on-one? You're going to hit them with the accusations audit. I know that you don't have a lot of faith in me as a leader. I know you think that I'm probably not worthy of the position, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to string them out. And there's a lot there that you can throw into an accusations audit. Last week during the meeting, I asked you to introduce yourself and you refused to do so. What caused that? get the response label, later paraphrase the response. Again, you're showing that tactical empathy, and then you're going to hit them with the I message to address the counterproductive behavior without sounding accusatory. When you display that type of insubordination in front of others, I feel frustrated because it undermines me as a leader. When I feel because is a perfect way for you to tell this person, knock it off. I'm not going to stand for it anymore. And then the conversation can be switched into what your relationship is going to look like going forward, what the ramifications are going to be if the behavior is repeated in the future. So again, you see the sequencing. Tactical empathy first, your goal and objective last. In the middle of that, we sandwiched in an I message, which is used to confront counterproductive behavior without sounding confrontational, without accusing the other side. You're telling them to knock it off without actually using the words, knock it off.
You do not want to refute any of your accusations, right? You don't want to say, you probably feel like I haven't given you a fair shake. But as your boss and having all the other things to consider, what you didn't see was that all this other data that I had to look at in order to make the decision, right? That's refuting your accusations audit. So exactly to your point, you never want to put your butt in somebody else's face. I'm sure you feel this way, but this is actually what it is. That's what you want to leave out. If but, and, or because comes to mind during your accusations audit, you probably just want to replace it with silence. Don't let the words come out of your mouth. Don't refute them, because it's what those words do is it negates everything that came before. Identifying elf and half clients, best way to do that is going to be with proof of life. Just as a reminder for those of you that may have missed it, accusations audit followed by proof of life. That's going to be a start, the beginning of starting to identify if they're elf or they're half, right? An elf client is probably going to have a good response for you. Well, you guys are the best. You got a great reputation. Half client is probably going to be like, isn't that why you're here? Aren't you here to tell me why we should do business with you? Probably half. Going to the virtual environment thing, right? And I know we've had a couple of comments in there. Zoom is much more efficient. And the reality is it is, right? I've got to get on a plane, spend 3 hours in the air one way just to sit down and have this meeting. I can jump on Zoom, be done in 20 minutes, and then get on to the next call, right? And so I think as the generations begin to change, right, Zoom will become much more of a staple. But I think just to Chris's mention in the simile, as it were, between when electric cars came on the scene versus putting gas cars out of business, right? The prediction was going to happen right away, and it still isn't even really that close to this day. Same thing I think is going to happen with Zoom. But the one thing to remember, I think all of you are feeling this, which is why we're having this class, right? Building a relationship from scratch on Zoom is very difficult to do. Maintaining a relationship on Zoom is not as difficult, but starting from scratch. And so the thing that I will caution you on is we always kind of make up what we think of people when we get a chance to finally see them. In my experience, when I've met people on virtually and then got a chance to see them in person, they're usually so shocked by my size and how my vibe is very different in person that it throws them off. And so I know this based on repetitions. And so I'm prepared for it if that is in fact the sequence of our engagements. And it will somewhat prepare them for that moment. Like, don't be shocked when a big light-skinned guy in all black comes walking down the street towards you, right? Don't turn and run, right? Or something, like I'll make some sort of a joke about it to set it up. Because I don't look very big. For those of you that know, like, I'm not a huge guy, but I'm 6'2" and I'm 325. I don't look quite like that on camera. So it surprises people. Incorporate that into your interactions. If you know it's coming, right? Don't let them get sideswiped by it. Make a joke about it ahead of time, or use it as your accusations on it, right? Like a lot of people, it's weird when you meet them for the first time in person, right? You never expect them to actually look the way that they do. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? Make it part of your accusations on it. And then in regards to the walk away, right? We all know that the walk away can be powerful because it's a decent way to inject fear of loss in someone. Now, fear of loss is a good thing. It's very powerful. The oxytocin here and now moment that Chris talked about earlier today is more powerful than the walk away. And so probability wise, right? We know common ground is great, but tactical empathy gets to trust faster. Same idea. Walk away might get you the deal, but there's a really good chance they're going to want to make a deal for you if you've created oxytocin for them in the moment. And so that's an alternative. And if you can shape your walk away to be fed by your oxytocin, it makes your walk away that much stronger. Because if you've created the bond, you turning and walking away after a bond is created, it's that much more difficult to let you out the door. And so my quick example of this, back when I was in my younger years, I used to love going, I lived in Newark, New Jersey. I used to love going downtown to do all my shopping because they had all like the name brand stuff for like dirt cheap, right? So I used to love going down there. And I used to love the walk away until I figured out that if I could create a quick bond of, I know you hate people walking in off the street into your place of business to try to tell you that your price is too high, right? And it's currently too high for me. And I follow that up with, this is, I appreciate you showing me this. Unfortunately, it's not something that I'm looking for. Knowing that they're willing to bargain over their price. And before I can even get all the way turned around, $20 has now turned into $15. $30 is $20. Just because the bond is there and I've identified, you're tired of dealing with these idiots. They walk in here and they go, give me this 40 thing for $20. How about, let me get the 5 for 20. You guys got that, right? They're tired of that crap. And so identifying that I understand that's a problem for them creates the bond, and then following up with, unfortunately, I'm in the same boat they are. Right? I came in just to see what I could work. Obviously, you don't need nobody telling you what your prices should be. Wait. We can do 5 for 20, just for you though, just for you. Right? Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting the discount without having to ask for it. So things to keep in mind. Right. And we're constantly talking about things. There's a lot to keep in mind, right? Your brain can get full real quick. But things to continue to think about as you work your way towards RE. And I know many of you are working your way that direction if you're not already there. And so things to continue to contemplate, as it were.
You just recently opened an art gallery and just started in business?
I've had my business for 23 years.
And you deal with pushovers on a regular basis?
I deal with rich people and
billionaires.
Billionaires, yes. And
they used to get in their way.
They do get their way. They plow over everybody, or
and
try to.
You recently found a book. Your brother talked you into it.
Yes, I did.
Thank God you listened to your brother because you didn't want to read the book.
I'm fairly successful, and I usually don't
fairly
have
successful.
roadblocks.
I think you're ridiculously successful, right?
Well, I'm okay. I'm good. I feel I'm lucky, but I had one situation that was really bothering me it was over 3 years, an agreement that had just not been honored, and I was trying every which way, in the ways I thought were natural to me, to basically push back, and the tougher he got, the tougher I got, and we just kept going back and forth, and he had dug his heels in, and I was just basically punching the air for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then I read the book.
Yeah.
Thought, okay, I'm going to try it. And
Yeah.
there's no way it's going to work, but I'm going to try it.
Give it a try.
And literally within 7 days, I got a wire for $700,000.
You are awesome.
And I was shocked. Truly
You were
shocked.
working on it for a year, and you solved
3
it in
years.
3 years.
3 years.
Solved in 7 days.
This was outstanding, this issue. We couldn't come to a meeting of the minds.
Sound like you were outstanding.
I was not willing to cave, which I think is the shock on the other side.
Yeah.
They're used to people just caving. And
Right.
I'm not a caver, but I wasn't going to let it
You grew
go
up in
away.
New York? You from
Yeah.
here? So you're a tough New York chick.
kind of. So, and you think, in the art world, you're dealing with art, that it's a very soft, lovely kind of,
That'd be tough, right? Commodities dealers, commodities exchange, right?
Yeah. And it's, the numbers are real, and there's people that are affected if it's real money.
You having fun here today?
Yeah, it's great. Totally great. Thank
You're
you.
at one of our special master classes.
So, is that what that says?
It's a master class
Yeah.
on tactical empathy,
Well, that
and you're having
yeah.
a good time.
I was thrilled to
Well,
see
the
that
place-
you were coming. So.
Thank you for coming today. We are
And
grateful that you
actually,
were here.
I need advice. I want to give this book to my sales team, but I'm afraid they'll use it on me. So, how
What do you think I
manage
have to
that?
deal with on a regular basis? Everybody in my company uses it on me. We work together though. It's for great collaboration.
Yeah.
The whole purpose is how do we create collaboration whether the other side wants to collaborate or not? Because we got to collaborate.
So I have a negotiating approach, which is a win-win. If I win, I want everyone to win.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that I do business with that they don't feel satisfied or that they've achieved anything unless there's a loser on the end of the deal. So they want a winner loser. So
we let them feel that way.
Okay.
It's not what actually happened; it's how they felt about it.
okay.
And we make
Yeah.
people feel the way they want to feel like they got a great deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
Like in
doesn't
this
actually change the
situation,
numbers.
this guy feels like he really got one over on me, and I feel totally satisfied that I got the $700,000. So, yeah, truly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's say you and I are bargaining or negotiating, and then I tell you I can't pay that price. I should absolutely stay strict with that number, right? Because if I move from it, let's say I'm willing to pay more, wouldn't that make me look like a liar? Because I said I can't do it, but then here I am saying, okay, I can pay a little bit more. So I'm just wondering, if I say I can't do that, should I absolutely mean it and not move from it? Because if I don't, I'm afraid I'll look like a liar. Long-term relationship might be damaged.
That's a great question. Okay, so if you are the one who's saying I can't do that, which I think is the angle you're coming at it from, right? If I was saying it, and if you were saying it, what I would suggest is pretty much exactly what you said: not to move off the number, right? When we do not say things in the attempt to manipulate. We say things in an attempt to influence and then let people know what our positioning is. If that's your true position and you want to be honest about your position and you go to that number and that's it, then I would suggest sticking to that, which is part of what the phases of no that we're getting into here in a second, right, will address. So personally, I would say, yeah, if you're going to do that, stick to it, live by it, don't come off it. Right? Use tactical empathy to say, I know I'm a jerk. I know this makes me sound terrible. I would imagine that you're thinking all of these horrible things about me since I said that, right? Like hit them heavy with those things. Now, vice versa, right? Flip side, you're dealing with somebody else who says, I just can't do that. Now, I'd love to say that more often than not, those people are being honest. They are genuinely exhibiting that they can't move any further. Unfortunately, we also all know that that's not always the case, right? There are those people out there that is technically a category that people who use a phrase like that fall into. But unfortunately, we know more often than not, it's probably a manipulative thing, or it's another way to, when people don't know how to exhibit it physically or with their voice or in an emotional standard, this idea of he or she who cares least wins, right? That's how people will try to articulate that with those words. I just can't go any further. And then you get them to move a little bit more. Perfect example, this is like Pawn Stars. I don't know if anybody's ever watched Pawn Stars. They are a great show to watch when it comes to, like, if you just want quick repetition on what human beings look like as they're going through into the emotional roller coaster of bargaining. What are some real simple things that people react to? Pawn Stars is a great thing to watch. And I would suggest, like, go on YouTube, type in like Pawn Stars, like craziest deals. And you can spend 5 minutes watching like 10 straight bargaining scenarios and really watch how people tick, which is really interesting. But there's somebody who does that. They go, that's my bottom line, right? 22,000. Like, oh, how about you do 24? No, 22,000. I can't go any further. And then they come up to like 22.5 or something before it's all said and done. And so that's another place where if you're getting that, responding with a form of tactile empathy is always going to be more effective than using a number. Something to the effect of, it sounds like you're getting a lot of pressure internally. It seems like I've put a lot of pressure on you as a result of making that ask, right? And then throw in more accusations on it. I'm sure that I look terrible. I'm sure that it makes me look really greedy. I'm sure it makes me look like I'm trying to be uncollaborative on purpose, right? Hit all those things. And then for the purposes of the exercise we're talking about right now, right? What's the no-oriented question or the thought-shaping question that you throw on the back end of that tactile empathy to get them to come off that this is as far as I can go. Now, in the rare case that they fall into the category of being completely honest, they'll probably start to get a little angry, but not really angry. The people that escalate from 0 to 100 right away, that instantly go from being, maybe they were a little bit angry the whole negotiation, and now they're spilling over the top. Or they've been completely calm the whole negotiation. Now we've gone to the price discussion, and they immediately are going boiling over. That is a tactic. That is all that is. People have those individuals, and more often than not, assertive types. They have learned that they can make people move, take any sort of movement whatsoever just by exhibiting so much anger. What's really interesting about these people, and this is kind of a separate topic, is those are also generally the ones that say, I like to keep emotion out of business, right? Business is not an emotional thing. And then they come in and go, and it's like what's happening here? The hypocrisy is hurting my brain right now. But great question, Chris, right? If we're using it, stick to it, be honest about it. We are never going to condone lying. And then if it's the flip side, you get it from the other side, chances are they're probably not honest. What else do we use to kind of combat that? It's going to be a form of tactile empathy combined with a label, no-oriented question, thought-shaping question, which you all are going to work on right now.
Let's go with Dean first. Dean, talk to me about your experience with dealing with cutthroat procurement negotiators.
It's, can be very clinical. They want to get the best deal possible. I do a lot of work with local government, so they can be really tight on trying to get the best price possible, the best terms. And they think the best way of doing that is to be strong and brutal about it. It raises a question for me, actually, which I was going to throw in earlier, which is, do you use priming as well when you're dealing with a cutthroat? Because I found that to be quite powerful as well.
So for the benefit of everybody else, because I know priming as a technique, are you in the UK?
Yes.
I know priming as a technique is huge in the UK. So share with the rest of the group what you mean by priming, and then we'll talk about its efficacy.
Sure, yeah. So one of the things I've been playing with a lot in recent years is you're starting to prime the individual for the behaviors that you want them to display. So I might start a conversation by saying, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. So I'm dropping in the words of generosity. But I'm also bringing in things like positive association or negative dissociation. So if I think about a cutthroat who wants to be seen as strong and powerful, I may negatively dissociate some of the weaker behaviors. So I might say to him, it's rare to meet somebody who's so strong and powerful at negotiation. I meet so many weak negotiators that they tend to be really unsuccessful because they don't seem to be able to connect with the person in front of them. So yeah. I'm priming for connection and openness and dropping a lot of those things in. So I wondered if that was something you've used as well.
In the hostage world, priming is done often. For example, it's clear to us you're not ready to come out now. When you are, let's talk about what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Now, Marcella did a fantastic job of priming this one guy that she dealt with on her first job, where she would take him back to the vision. What's it going to look like when you come downstairs? What's it going to look like when you actually put that gun down? What's it going to look like when you're out and walking the beach that you so desperately want to get back to? She did a lot of that priming. So, but what are you really doing when you're priming like that? How does that dovetail with what we talk about at Black Swan? It dovetails because priming is another skill by which you are demonstrating tactical empathy. It's another way that you are deferring to the other side. It's another way to demonstrate you're subordinating yourself to the other side. When you say something like it's rare to meet a negotiator as strong as you, what are you doing?
Releasing chemicals.
Yeah, you're giving them hits of dopamine. They're like, yeah, that's right. That's right. And they go about telling you how they cleaned the clock of the last person that they were in the room with. And that's providing you vital information of what you need to either expound on or avoid during your conversation. So I like the idea of priming, and I wanted you to actually lay it out for the rest of the group, because priming is just another tool for tactical empathy. That's all it is.
Mm. And would you then follow that up with the behaviors you want them to display more of, like openness and connection?
I think that's going to be self-evident because of your openness and your drive for connection. Because it's all under that tactical empathy umbrella, the rule of reciprocity holds true. So I don't necessarily need to voice it. I'm going to demonstrate it. And that carries a lot more weight than you trying to plant it, so to speak.